And she says, we keep hearing about legitimate concerns over immigration. The truth is, there are none. Well, I mean, we could wax lyrical until the cows come home. It says immigrants aren't to blame for a society designed to benefit the richest, and it's time Labour started telling the public so. Well, I don't think it's capitalism and market competition that's been responsible for the Manchester Arena bombing. Do you? I mean, I just find that such a preposterous argument. One, about the safety of uncontrolled, unfettered migration, but also around the ramifications on wages for the working class, on access to housing, whether that be social or private rental sector, and a whole host of things where this newspaper, which is a rag that isn't good enough for wiping your bottom on, I would argue has a lot to answer for. It was set up as the Manchester Guardian actually speak up for the working man. They wouldn't know a working man if Del Boy or Compo from Last of the Summer Wine walked over with a fish and chip wrapper and slapped it over their mush. So I lose all semblance of sanity when I read things like this. Not that I had much of a grip on it anyway, but you can see where I keep labouring this point. I know I keep saying it now. I've said it several times throughout this discussion, but we keep going back to they sense an opportunity. They want to create an environment in which there is a chilling effect upon speech and debate around this issue and prevent us from actually being able to discuss it, because we, for some time, were winning the argument. The Labour Party was saying, we're going to stop the boats. We're going to do our X, Y, Z. Now, of course, they were never going to do that, right? I'm not an idiot. But they were saying it. Now maybe they don't have to, because, well, who's going to argue with them? Everyone's too bloody scared of being banged up. I don't know who I was directing that question to, so
Yeah.
whoever
Well,
wants
no,
to
I
jump
mean,
in.
yeah, I mean, and articles like this just fan the flames even more, and it shows how out of touch so many politicos,
Mm.
so many journalists are within the bubble, the elite bubble at the top. And it really just turns. It's one of the reasons why the mainstream media is dying so rapidly. It's not just dying here in the UK. You look at the viewing figures; it's just plummeting every year. But it's dying in America as well, where the bias and the lack of any sort of self-awareness of what's going on around them is just so close to zero. But there have been some good counter articles to this. One was in the Telegraph by Sherelle, I can't remember her last name, but I posted it the other day. Jacobs, thank you, where she said the cause of this is the undermining of young white working class people, and that's so true. And I'm pleased to see there are some publications that will still publish the truth, whilst they're still independent. That is, at least anyway. But you know, it's chilling, Darren. It's chilling, and but sadly, I don't know how many of us are really surprised. The only thing that's changed is we now have a government that is the Guardian. It's the Guardian in government. And they hate these conversations. They never want to have them, and they're going to enforce the same sort of communist diktat the Guardian spews out every day onto the masses of this country.
And Martin says, by pushing immigrants to the top of the queue, it might bring British people together to speak up louder than ever before. Yeah, I mean, Chloe, that's a good point. I mean, do you think that actually they can sort of quash the resistance, as it were? And I'm not for, before someone clips this up as well and says, oh, he calls it the resistance, you know, people throwing things at police officers and things like that. No, that is not what I'm saying. I'm saying that the resistance is people actually having conversations like this one, where we refuse to be cowed by a few idiots acting up, and then these people thinking that they have the right to silence the rest of us. Right? That's the free speech principle that's at stake here.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes it needs to get worse before it gets better, and that we have to
God
get
help
to
us.
it has to get to a tipping point before people start getting outraged and start speaking out. But I feel like we are there. I feel like over the past year, people have absolutely had enough and really started to see the horrifying impacts of mass migration. I don't think it needs to, nor do I want it to, get any worse than the situation it is in now. I think, just speaking about that article there, I mean, you're absolutely right, Alex, that this girl is clearly in a bubble and completely out of touch. She's saying that society is designed to benefit the rich, and that the fact that working class people are struggling because of mass migration, that, that's just because society was designed to benefit the rich. I mean, how deluded is that statement? No, our society is not designed to benefit the rich when we've got the highest tax rates since the Second World War, and the rich get taxed absolutely to death. Most of them are running out of the country to somewhere like Dubai, where they don't have to give away all their money, let's be honest. And I just think it's just so out of touch to suggest that mass migration hasn't had anything to do with the fact that you've got working class people struggling to pay their rent because there is a housing crisis. You've got working class people struggling to get a GP appointment. They can't afford to get Bupa. You've got people pulling out their own teeth at home because they can't get a dentist appointment. Some of you who will have watched our podcast a few weeks ago, where we showed you that video of the queue around the block and block for ages just for a new dentist that was opening, people queuing up to get an appointment. People are struggling to get places for their kids in school, or they're in a school but the classroom is absolutely exploding where they don't get any attention from the teachers because there are so many kids in the school. To suggest that mass migration has had nothing to do with any of this and none of your concerns are legitimate and you're all just racist bigots is just absolutely ridiculous, and it makes the problem worse when you see that the people in their Westminster bubble, they're not even interested in listening to you. They could say you've got a legitimate concern, but for X, Y, and Z reason, I think that you've got your wires crossed and mass migration wasn't the cause. Fine, but they're not even giving them the time of day to listen to them.
No, because their opinion is irrelevant to these people, right? That's the very heart of the issue. They say they stand up for the working class, but they really don't. They sneer and condescend, and they only like the working class if the working class parrot the same views as them. I've never believed that, for as long as I've been on this planet, and we were beneficiaries of Gordon Brown's welfare reforms. Mother was a single parent, blah, blah, blah. But I've never believed that these people actually speak, that they understand and could speak to us as people. They see us as vermin and all these other things. Alex, I wanted to, before we move on to something a little bit more fun, I want to talk about pregnant men for 2 seconds before...
my favourite topic, Darren.
Absolutely, I'm sure you've been speaking about it on GB News ad nauseum. But the question I wanted to ask you was, do you see a double standard in the application of the law that we've seen over recent days, and the fact that the Labour Party have links to this hope not hate thing, either in support or people being associated with it? Hope Not Hate being a charity, believe it or not, that I think is ironically named because I happen to believe that they're pretty hateful people themselves. And people were sharing Hope Not Hate. One of their senior people, Nick Laws, tweeted out the lie that a Muslim had acid thrown in her face, for example. A Labour MP parroted the same story. That is quote unquote disinformation that stirs up riots, isn't it? So where is the application of the law as it has been so stridently applied over the last few days? Am I being too hyperbolic here?
No, well, you're not missing anything, Darren, that's for sure. What's missing is the law being enforced fairly, that is. I think this is one of the great things about social media is it's constantly exposing the truth in so unfortunate ways, because nobody really wants to believe this is true. I'd love someone to show me evidence that it's not true, but it is proving to be that if you're on the left and you come from a certain, I don't know, class or think tank or group that is sort of sensitive towards the government's thoughts of the day, the politico of the day, then you will be exempt from the so-called hate speech laws or so-called misinformation. And in fact, this is the same Nick Gallows is the same guy that tweeted out that the so-called counter protest who ended up countering nobody was a hoax. It was all set up as a hoax.
Yes.
And 20 minutes later, he's tweeting again going, it's not a hoax. I mean, What's misinformation there? This is a man that should have come out and said, sorry, you were all lied to. There was no protest organised today. We're going to look into the causes as to why why this happened in the first place. Where's the investigative journalists looking into this hoax? They're all looking into the Southport riots, but none of them are looking into the hoax that caused the counter protest, which also led to violence in places like Birmingham. Let's not forget. So you're right. You're not missing anything, Darren. The reality is that we know this two-tier justice system, this two-tier policing exists, and it's constantly being exposed online, which is just proving to people the point that we've always knew was to be true.
Well, I've put myself forward, Chloe, to become the elder of my community in order to actually put me above the law, so that police forces have to actually seek my approval before they put in place any policing whatsoever. And that's how it worked in Birmingham after the incident in which Alex references. So I figure if I become an elder of my community up here in the northeast of England, then, well, I'm untouchable. So that's what I'm going to do.
How do we do that? How do we apply for that?
That's a good
question. Well, we need to learn. Well, let's have a look at how they did it in Birmingham, shall we?
Community leaders.
Yes.
Although I doubt we'll get elected, let's be honest.
It's so terrifying, though, to think that these people aren't elected by... Who are they elected by? Who chose them? It's so deeply corrupt. It stinks. It stinks. And British people are rightfully fed up. That's rubbish. For the police to be sat there saying Assalamu alaikum, I can't say that properly myself, we're surrounded by so-called community leaders, is the perfect example of why people are fed up. It's not, again, because the police are addressing them in a foreign language, although I don't think that should ever happen on British soil, but it's because they are pandering to specific groups of people saying, we'll protect you, don't worry. Well, they didn't come and say grace, while the grace to all the Christians were surrounded by priests when the statue of St. Mary was destroyed in Wembley. No. There was none of that.
You've barely seen that covered anywhere. I just saw one photo on Twitter and that was it.
Yep.
We did bring it up on here last week, didn't we? I remember we did it. Have you got what it takes to be a reasoned presenter? Well, send us a short clip of yourself to join@reasoned.uk and we might be seeing you on this very channel very soon indeed.